to Paris, a State of Mind. Join us as we talk about the good, the bad, the ins, the outs of property rentals and purchases in and around Paris. We'll have topics for renters, owners, and visitors, share questions we are regularly asked, and more. My name is Gail Boisclair of Perfectly Paris, and my co-host is Marie Pistinier of Lokim Paris. Be a part of it. Both of us are proud members of the SPLM, the first representative body of furnished rental professionals. Hey, Marie, we're back in the saddle again. We had such a wild conversation in our last episode talking about all the stuff for owners that we couldn't even pack it into one episode. So we've got to go back and start this whole new episode relating to owners, but rental contracts, right?
Yes, because we love paperwork.
You
So we
love
love,
paperwork.
yeah,
Oh, I hate
French
paperwork.
loved, and that we have many different way of doing the things. So we have different type of rentals, different type of lease, and some of them are overpassing the others. So it's everything is can be blurry. We have some fixed things that are very clear on what you have to do, and some other are much more blurry in the or in between.
Well, okay. So I guess, there's so many different contracts, you're right, but maybe we could break them down into short rentals, medium rentals, and long rentals. Does that sound good?
Yes, it's exactly the way people are staying in Paris or in France. Because what we are going to say is some things are specific to Paris, but others are just French. It's like nothing's particular with Paris. It's all over France the same way.
All right. Well, let's talk about the short stays, which would probably be more people like holiday rentals or people coming for a short work assignment or whatever, something like that. Is that what a short stay would be?
Yeah, it would be my definition. Even though in the law you can find others, it's really people can say short stays. And okay, I'm saying like I'm staying in Paris for 6 months and it's a short stay, or I'm staying for 3 days and it's a short stay. But for my definition, and I guess that most professional short stays would be really from few days to it will be more like a touristic rentals,
Uh-huh.
and it can be for a few days or few weeks, and it will be more like a place where you're not going to stay that long, and you are going to move out after.
Okay. And for short stays, somebody would need to register. How would they be able to rent out something for a short stay?
So if you are an owner and you want to rent it for a short stay in Paris in particular, you have to know that there is a specific and a very strong regulation. You cannot just say, okay, I'm going to buy a pied-à-terre and I'm going to put that on the market, and I will have plenty of tourists who are going to check in and everything. It is very specific. When you own the place, and if you want to put it on the rental market as a vacation rental, it has to be either your primary home. That means that you are at least 8 months a year in Paris, and that you are, and in that case, you are allowed to rent it out for 120 days, so like over 4 months, up to 4 months, and not more. You will have to be registered. Of course, you will have to pay the taxe de séjour, the city tax, but this is in any case, you have to pay for that. And then you can rent it. So it can be like 2 days on this month and three on the others. You can really do whatever you want. But at least it has to be a maximum of 4 months, 120 days. If you pass through classical platforms in order to book, most of them will stop showing your apartments when you reach out the 120 days. And most of the platforms will be also sending all the informations to the city hall. So you don't want to mess around and to try to bake like 100 days on, for example, let's say Airbnb, and 100 days on booking.com, and 100 days on HomeAway, for example, or Abritel. I'm not doing any advertising for those companies. It's just like when you go through platforms, it's mandatory that they, and even like rental agencies as well, it's mandatory that you just give the city the information on the number of nights you have rented your apartment.
Well, and it's tracked obviously then by the registration number that you get from the city hall. So it's really easy for the Mary City Hall to put it all together when they get
Yeah.
all the data from the different platforms and things. So yes, don't cheat. You'll get in trouble.
Yes, exactly. So this is for when it's your primary home, and it's limited. So, and if you are an investor and if you want to really put an apartment on the vacation rental market, I said investors because you cannot have your secondary home. You cannot say, okay, this is my secondary home. It's empty most of the year. I'm coming to Paris like 3 times a year, and I want to rent out the other days. This is not allowed. In order to be able to do that, you have to have what we call a commercial usage. The apartment have to have this commercial usage in order to be able to be rented out all year long. To do that, either you buy it with the commercial usage already in place. So in that case, probably you are going to buy a little more than the market price because it has it's a compensation in order to, because you are going to be allowed to rent it out to tourists. Or you have to buy this commerciality, to this commercial usage, and to do so it's a process. It's not easy because you can to try to make it a little really short. It's like a real summary. You are going to buy commercial square meters that are virtual. It's not existing square meters. For example,
Good
you are
God.
you are in the second arrondissement, and so you have to find commercial square meters that are available in the second arrondissement. It can be, for example, an old hospital that is going to be turned into apartments where people are going to live for housing, classical housing. Then, as it was an hospital, it was a commercial usage. So there is this kind of square meters that are available, but it's not, you don't touch them. It's really virtual
That's
square meters.
crazy, man. That's
It's
crazy.
it's really complicated. So you really have to go through a professional, and it's not like the classical real estate agent. You have real estate agents which are really specialized on that, and you have to contact them so they will really help you through the whole process in order to acquire some usage commercial,
Commercials. Holy cow.
commercial square meters, and you have to compensate like it's one for two. Like you are going to turn 1 square meters in from housing the housing market into commercials. You have to buy 2 square meters of commercial usage.
Oh, double the
this
price.
this yeah, but the square meter price on commercial is much lower than the price you purchased your Paris apartment. So it's really like a math things to do in order to say, okay, am I going to go through this whole process? Is it going to worth it? And once because you are going to pay a lot, your apartment when you buy it is going to be much more expensive than when you buy it just to put it on the long-term rental market. So you have to do the math in order to see if it's going to be profitable at the end. In many arrondissements it is, but it's very complicated to get those commercial square meters. So
Yeah.
it's a long run, but it can worth the try. But it's a specific way. So that means that if you want to do if you want to rent to tourists, either it's your primary home or it has to have the commercial usage. It's not your secondary home that you can rent it 3 days by, on this side and on another on the other side. It's not possible.
We'll be right back with Paris, a state of mind, after a word from our sponsors.
We've all seen the Eiffel Tower, queued at the Louvre, and picnicked on the steps of Sacré-Cœur. But a treasure hunt through the Marais, drag queen bingo in Belleville, graffiti art installations in abandoned warehouses in the 14th? Those are the unique Parisian experiences we don't want to let slip away. My name is Jennifer Garrity, and I'm the host of Don't Miss This. From art installations to authors' talks to tours to culinary ateliers and everything in between, each week, Don't Miss This will fill you in on the best of what's going on in Paris. Don't Miss This airs every Sunday on Paris Underground Radio. If you think you've got something we should know about, please email us at hello@parisundergroundradio.com. Happy exploring!
And now back to Paris, a state of mind. So let's talk about medium stays.
Not sure it's going to be much easier than that.
You're kidding.
It's no, so medium stay, we would say as a professional agent, but everyone can have his own definition. It's like for me, someone who is going to spend like 4 months or 6 months in Paris, for me, it's a medium stay. It's not like it's not a
Yeah, me
long term.
too.
Long term
Yeah.
will be a year and more, and usually in between, below a year, it will be like more a medium stay.
Yeah, so there's different types of contracts for medium stays than I imagine, right? Because there's going to be different reasons why people might be only staying for a medium period of time, like a few months or something,
Yes,
or
because
6 months or 8 months or whatever.
usually when you come for 3 months, it's like you are not going to change your home residence. It's not going to be your primary home. Like it's only 3 months. So you have several things you can do. So you have the bimobilité, which is a new type of lease, which is you can use it from 1 month to 10 months, and it has to be specific to some type of profile. You cannot put everyone in this type of lease. So it's, for example, people who are doing on a temporary assignment. They can match by mobility, or like we say, like superior studies, like studies that are at a higher level, and you have to prove that it's that you are in this kind of profile. Like your tenant has to say, okay, I'm here for temporary assignment by my company, and you have to prove that. Then you can offer the bimobility.
It's the tenant that has the obligation to give the proof and not the.
He gives the proof, or he says the meaning of the purpose of the say. So if he says, okay, I'm going to be there for an internship, for example, or a contrat d'apprentissage, which is when people are usually young people are going to be there like a week in school and a week in a company in order to learn things and to put that in motion. Then usually it's the person, so we don't ask like, okay, show me your details, but we should be able to say, okay, this person, she's a student, she's coming for a 6 months internship, so that's why I gave her this type of lease. This type of lease it's very interesting for the tenant because it's under the rent control price, that the rent control that we talked about a little before in our previous podcast. So for the tenant, it's interesting. Also, the agency fees are also controlled, and we didn't talk about that later, but maybe it will be soon a new episode on how much are agency fees on the rental part, on the purchase part, and everything. So it can become something interesting. And so for the tenant, it's very interesting because the agency fees are cap. We cannot go above a certain amount. But the owner also has this type of amount that he can pay, but it's a lease that can be every 6 months. Usually owners are not really fond of this type of lease because they may be forced to pay several times the agency fees. So we can understand that depending on the type of lease, depending on the profile, they may not say, okay, I'm not going to pay twice a year the same agency fees. So it's something to see. Another thing that is complicated with this lease, I'm sorry, is that there is no damage deposit.
Ooh.
So this is a real topic because some people, maybe some owners, may say, okay, how do we do? So you are supposed to be able to go after your tenants once if there is any issue. But it's true that usually agents and owners are not really fond of this kind of lease because you have to go after the money if there is any problem. Problem can be only like some additional cleaning to do or things like that. Maybe it's not a big problem, but it's always time consuming to go after a tenant or his guarantor in order to get some extra money. But it can be interesting depending on the type of profile you can get. It's like from 1 to 10 months. But not everybody can match this type of lease.
And it's also not renewable, right?
No, I think it's like renewable one time, and if it's more, and if the person wants to be more than one time, then like the person books for 2 months, and then she wants an additional 3 months, for example. But then finally she said, okay, I need 2 extra months. Actually, the law forces you to give her like a long-term lease.
Mm.
So you cannot do like 3 times or 4 times the 2 months, 2 months, 2 months, 2 months.
Yeah.
You have to give, even though the person doesn't want to, because not going to stay a long time.
Yeah.
You are supposed to give her the security with a long-term lease.
Complicated.
Yep.
Especially in these periods of time where we've got so many digital nomads and things like that that are coming to Paris or other cities or what have you, and they sometimes don't know how long they're going to be here. And
Yeah.
really, they've got an assignment that is going to last for 2 months, and they did a lease for 2 months, but then all of a sudden they've got to stay for longer. Especially with COVID times, everybody working from home, it makes it so complicated. And it's a bit of a drag that you can't renew it as much as you might want to renew it, and then you have to give somebody a lease they don't want to have. Oh my goodness.
So really, and I'm not how do we say that? Prêcher pour sa paroisse. Preaching for your own church, right? Something like that. Do you have this kind of expression?
It's like well, we have our similar one is probably like preaching to the choir, which is
like you say things and people think that you are just giving getting the thing directly.
well, preaching to the choir is kind of like, it's like you're telling somebody something that they probably already know or whatever.
So prêcher pour sa paroisse is not exactly that. It's more like, for example, for this example in particular, I would say, okay, you've seen how complicated can be the choice of lease, what type of lease you are going to choose when you are an owner and you are willing to rent it out.
Yeah.
So definitely, probably go and get an agent in order to help you to choose, okay, if you can do the lease by mobilité, or if you have to go to another type of lease in order to be square and secure and safe.
I think that we have a tagline, Marie. We've got a new tagline. It's called "Use a Professional."
Yeah. this is exactly that.
Don't DIY. We all know what that turns out like. I'm getting slightly off topic, but we want to put up a shelf and we buy all the stuff, and then we realize we've got 2 massive holes in our wall, and then we have to call in a professional to fix it all anyway. So don't DIY.
Yeah, especially, and because this podcast is also for people who are not speaking French. When you are not comfortable with because the real estate vocabulary, the laws are changing very often, and it's complicated to follow everything. Even for professionals who are trained and who read the paper and who get some information
It's
from the
crazy.
insurance and everything, we always have new things. And so, but this was for the medium stays. This is a kind of list you can have. And when you don't, for example, imagine you have a tenant who come to your office and he wants to have like a 4 months lease because he's going to have a surgery, and then after he needs to rest in an apartment before he can go back home, for example. This person will not fit into the mobility lease. It will not work.
That's
Someone
so
who
silly.
Yeah, someone who gets divorced and who needs to have a temporary home to be close to his kids' school, for example, it's not going to work.
I've had leases like that, and it's so ridiculous, isn't it, that you can't put that on a mobility lease. Yeah.
You have, for example, you have a leak issue, and your place is like
Renovations.
overflowed with and under renovation, and the insurance is saying, okay, the work are going to last for 3 months, and so we are going to pay you an apartment for rent for 3 months, but you cannot match them. It doesn't fit. It's like you want to put like a square into a round or a circle. So it's so if so, really ask a professional so he can guides you and advise, and of course probably you'll pay for this, but you'll make sure that you are safe and that you are right square in the
that you have the right lease for the right thing, right situation. Well, and then I guess that just leaves us with, corporate leases and long-term leases.
Mm-hmm. Corporate lease, usually owners love that. They love to have a company who commit for their employees in order to get a tenant, to have a lease. And it's always very interesting. Usually you have to use what we call a by-code civil, because we have two different type of lease, which depend on different codes and different laws and rules. So I'm not going to dive too much into this, but corporate lease is a very flexible lease. It's a bail civil, so you can have a company, because obviously it's not going to be the primary home of the company, and who will say, okay, this company is going to rent for the usage of this person this apartment for 6 months, 8 months. It can be renewable or not. It can be for 1 year and it can be renewed. So it's really it's a really flexible lease.
And so then for a long lease would be considered. So what is considered actually a standard long lease? Isn't it like 9 months for a student, 12 months for a normal person or something like that?
Yes, it's so it's funny to say a normal person versus a student. Maybe we can
No,
discuss that.
students are abnormal.
So yes, and one of the point which is interesting with the I'm jumping back on the corporate lease will be the rent control. There is no
Oh,
rent.
yeah.
Yeah, there is no rent control on the Baikot civil, which means that you can be flexible. You don't need to justify that you are above the rent control limit. But that doesn't assure you to rent your apartment. It just gives you a little more flexibility, and usually on the agency fees, it's a little more flexible as well.
Yeah,
And so
because, well, with corporate lease, you would need different amenities because the people are there for business. There's certain things that they're going to need that I think are more important for their work, you know? So,
yes,
yeah, you have to be a little bit flexible.
and so
But yes.
to jump back on the normal people versus the students. So yes, you have a long-term lease will be for a student, it will be 9 months. So it will be their primary home, because usually we say, okay, from September to June, which are usually the months where we have our student in school, not during the COVID time, of course, but it's usually the school year. It's considered as their primary home, even though we can have students who come from abroad for like just a semester. Then, of course, the classic primary home lease will be like the 1 year lease, renewable. It's like a classical lease with rent control. Agency fees also are do have a maximum that tenant shouldn't pay above. The owner can pay a little above because it's. For example, if the agent you are working with provides you with more services, he can charge you a little more, but we cannot charge the tenant more than the owners. So it's an important point. And so in that case, you have a primary home lease. It's automatically renewable, and and when it's for an unfurnished place, it's like for 3 years, and then when it's furnished, it's only for 1 year. So, but it's a kind of security.
We'll be right back with Paris, a State of Mind, after a word from our sponsors.
Is Paris the most romantic city in the world? It is, but there's much more to its romantic allure than the Eiffel Tower. The Romancing in Paris podcast aims to reveal the true romantic essence of the city. Secret gardens, hidden historic sites, and terribly seductive bars. Join romantic expert and writer Lily Heisey as we discover the city's best romantic spots, ideal for both curious couples and lovers of Paris alike. Ready to experience the real romantic Paris? Tune into the Romancing in Paris podcast every Wednesday on Paris Underground Radio. Visit parisundergroundradio.com/Romancing in Paris to listen and subscribe.
And now back to Paris, a State of Mind. We've got a lot of differences between short, medium, and long types of rental contracts. Plus, there's differences of whether the property the owner wants to rent out, whether it's their primary residence or their secondary residence. How do you make the distinction between the two? What's the difference?
For the residence of the owner, you mean?
Yeah. If they're renting out a primary residence or a secondary residence.
It's a tricky thing, because in fact you have two definitions. You have the fiscal definition, like your primary home. It's where you are supposed to pay your taxes. It's where you can find, I don't know, you have your gym subscription, or you have your habits, like the doctor and everything. And you are supposed to live there like at least 8 months a year. This is supposed to be your primary home. And your secondary home is where you stay less than that. But sometimes you have other type of situation where people are not like 8 months
Yeah.
now in nowadays, with people moving in and out, with you talked about the digital nomads, like people who come in and come out. It's complicated. So okay, where is the primary home? And so you have the fiscal, you have the lease, which says, okay, this is my primary home, but in fact maybe it's not, because legally maybe you are taxed elsewhere, and you do have other things that says that your primary home may be elsewhere.
Well, and it's like, what do you do? It's true in a situation where you've got, say, some woman that lives in Marseille and she has to come to Paris for her work through the week, but then she goes back to Marseille on the weekend. Where's her primary residence? Like, and what the heck does she rent?
Yeah, this is exactly the tricky things. Like, if she's at home, of course, if she has her kids, her family, and everything, and so her doctor and maybe our gym is in Marseille, or maybe she could just go to swim at the end of the day. But that means that probably her primary home is in Marseille. But when she's going to be in Paris, because she's going to be there, I don't know, for one day or 2 days, she's not going to each week rent only for 5 days. She's going to book an apartment for probably a year. So what type of lease should we do?
Yeah.
We don't have the answer in the books. Like,
In all the
probably
paperwork?
no, because probably people would say, okay, it's going to be a 1 year lease, so it should be a primary home. Okay, but my primary home is actually with my family in the south of France. So
Yeah,
this
even
is why.
though, yeah, and in that situation, she'd probably be spending, in theory, more time in Paris than what she would in Marseille.
Yeah. So it's really
Confusing.
why you have to work with a professional. But this podcast is not only to say, okay, come and work with us. This is not the topic, but this is just only to say that sometimes situations are not, the law seems clear, the texts, the what we want seems clear, but in the details,
Can
the
we say that?
devil hide in the details. That is
Yeah,
one of.
the devil's in the details. It's like, there's black, there's white, and there are 50 shades of gray in between. Well, after all the confusion about that, I think we've got that down. But then, I mean, there's all these different types of rental contracts. But then there's also, we talked in the previous episode a little bit about the how much notice a renter needs to give to leave their apartment, and how much notice an owner might need to give to get a renter out, when it's only in this case where it's a furnished rental. How does that work?
Yeah, for the owners, in fact, when it's a vacation rental, when it's really short stays, like on by mobility or other type of lease that can be in between, usually the owners don't have any notice to give. He has to follow the contract, and the contract goes up to the end date, which is stated in the document. When you have a 1 year lease renewable, or 3 year lease renewable when it's an unfurnished place, it's for the furnished place, it's 3 months, at least 3 months before the anniversary date of the lease. Like, if you sign on the 1st of April, you have to think 3 months back, and it's depending on the signature of the lease, not the check-in. You may have signed the lease and say,
Oh.
okay, the lease is starting on April 1st, but then I'm going to do my check-in on April 15 because I'm not going to be there before. So this is not the check-in date. This is really the beginning of the lease, which is important. And so you have to do that at least 3 months. So if you know that you are going to give the notice, give it probably a little more in advance in order to make sure that that's received.
Mhm.
The downside would be probably that the tenant may think that, okay, in 3 months I'm going to have to leave, so I'm going to look right now to find an apartment. So maybe they will give their notice. They will say, okay, I'm going to leave like next month, and it will shorten the lease you have. So you have to think about that. When it's a 3 year lease, like for unfurnished place, you have to do that at least 6 months before the date of the beginning of the lease. So it's really important to make sure that you are very square on that. And also on those two type of lease, last but not least, you do have to justify why you get the apartment. It has to be either because you're going to live in yourself, or a close family member, like people like the grandparents or the children or the little children, for example. It cannot be like, I have a friend who wants to come in. This is not working. You have really to justify that. Or it can be also because you want to sell the place. And as we said in our previous podcast, when you sell a place with someone inside with an ongoing lease, usually the price is lower. So you prefer to get rid of the tenant, if I can say so, in order to make sure that it's going to be sold empty of tenant. And so in that case, you are more flexible, and you have more autonomy, I would say, on your sale. And for the tenant, you have to know that in all over France, in what we call the zone tendue, which would be like the tense
The
area.
tense word. We're tense. That's like Paris. We're very tense in
We're
Paris.
very tense lately, and
Zone tendu.
the tendu twilight zone. So it's when you have above 200,000 people, we are considered as a zone tendu, which means that there is many people and apartments, so we can reduce the notice. And if so, the notice is only 1 month for the tenant. So the tenant has more flexibility than the owners. Same for the by mobility. He can give his notice with only 1 month. Same for the unfurnished apartment, it's only 1 month. And same for the a company, like on a corporate lease or on the long-term lease.
So basically, in Paris, the tenant always has the right to give only 1 month notice if they want to move out.
Exactly.
Important. Yeah. I think that cleared up a lot of things about the rental contracts. Oh,
If you need more information, you should definitely come and contact us. And through the show notes, there is some contact information, so we can help you out if needed.
yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness. But I tell you what, there are definitely a lot of rental contracts, and it seems that there's still not quite enough for everyone in every case. We can't help that darn woman in Marseille.
No.
I think I learned a lot in this episode, and I do think that I understand a little bit the breakdown between the short, the medium, and the longer term rentals. And as you said, I think that if owners are not really sure what to do, the best thing is to contact a professional for some advice, and don't DIY. Don't do it
Yes,
yourself.
don't.
DIY, do it yourself. Yeah, DIY. Don't DIY. Because you're going to have to call a professional to put up that shelf again.
Thank you very much, Gail.
My pleasure. Thank you, Marie. This has been great. Again.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Paris, A State of Mind, featuring Gail of Perfectly Paris and Marie of Loquim, both who are founding members of the SPLM. Paris, A State of Mind is produced by Paris Underground Radio. The music, Jazz in Paris, is by Media Right Productions. For more information on this show and others, go to parisundergroundradio.com.